Hello everybody and welcome back. Here's again Captain Sidaris. Today I have the privilege to talk to TS Forever, one of the developers of my all-time favorite Battlefield 2 mod, Forgotten Hope 2. Hello!
Hello!
I have to say congratulations to a successful release of your latest version.
Thank you very much.
I guess you are quite proud of this one. And although maybe a little bit tired, was it very taxing?
Well, release day is always a bit taxing because you want to play, but there's usually a lot of new people who might have technical trouble that you have to help out. And we also had to, although I think most people didn't notice that, but we also kind of had to push a little patch out for the server to fix some issues. So yeah, there was a lot going on. Generally speaking, we developed, it was 2 years since the last patch that we developed the French. Yeah, it was quite taxing, but it's not really like a job, so I wouldn't complain too much.
Well, although a hobby can be quite stressful, but you're right, it's still more fun than stress.
Yeah.
But before we go too deep into the subject, I would like you to introduce yourself to the audience. Who are you?
Well, I'm Tears Forever, and I'm one of the developers of Forgotten Hope 2. Namely, I make maps for it. That's my main kind of thing. And I made 2 maps for the latest patch, which has 4 all in all. And yeah, that's basically me.
And how did you get into the Battlefield franchise and into modding?
Oh no, that's a long story.
I have time.
Okay, that's fine then. First of all, how I got into modding, I always loved games with map editors. And that started, I believe, with Age of Empires 2, which was like the big game when I grew up, and that had a map editor. And after that it was, for me, Warcraft 3, where you could do a lot of things in the map editor, including like changing basically everything. So yeah, I was always into this idea of making my own custom content for games. Although before Forgotten Hope 2 I was never in a real mod team. It was just for private use, so to speak, making my own stuff for private use, sometimes even just for myself, sometimes for buddies. In terms of Battlefield, that started with Battlefield 1942, and back then I never actually played it online. I was too young for that, and we didn't really have the internet in my family. But I played against bots, and at some point, my cousin, I think it was, he bought, I think it was on eBay, he bought this huge kind of DVD compilation thing. Like, it was 5, I think it was actually CDs, it was 5 or 6 CDs at that time, and this was full of Battlefield 1942 mods, including Forgotten Hope 1, but also stuff like Desert Combat and stuff like that. And that's how I got into Forgotten Hope. I played it a bit single player, and at some point I looked up the website, and they're planning to do Forgotten Hope 2. I think Battlefield 2 wasn't even out back then. It's all a bit fuzzy right now. But yeah, I did actually play Forgotten Hope 2 on the first day it came out in, I want to say 2007, when it was still just Africa. And then I kind of stayed in that community, I guess. And I more and more wanted to also try modding it myself, which was harder than the games I had worked on before. Because these strategy game editors, they're pretty idiot-proof. Making a map for Battlefield 2 is a lot more complicated. But yeah, I worked on that. I made more and more maps. They were all kind of shit. But, I kept going at it. And at some point I was admitted into the team as a beta tester. Kept making more maps. And at some point, basically, the development of FH2 died after the 2.45 expansion. Like, it died during the development of the Eastern Front, and then it started up again, and that's when I actually became a developer, because I finished the Omaha Beach map that had been lying around for ages. That was my first project that went into Forgotten Hope 2, and ever since then I've been a developer making maps.
A question already there about Battlefield 1942. There was a collector's edition basically, including many of the community mods?
No, there wasn't official. There was something on eBay. Somebody basically made like a compilation of these unofficial mods and sold it on eBay, which might have been illegal, I don't know. That said, it's interesting. In some countries, now this was in Germany obviously, but in some countries like in Russia, they did sell Forgotten Hope 2. Unofficially, of course. Like, there's pictures out there, if you look for them, of Forgotten Hope 2 DVD boxes with like games for Windows on top of it and stuff. So, there's that.
Nice. It's really nice. I know it will be probably highly illegal, but
Yeah.
the idea is quite nice.
It wasn't us, of course, but they were in some supermarket chains, apparently.
Sure. I guess outside of the Battlefield 2 community, outside of the long-time players, I guess not many fans know Forgotten Hope 2. Can you give us maybe a short summary about it? What is it?
It's basically a World War II themed mod for Battlefield 2. It's a total conversion, so everything about it is changed. It's not just some kind of skin swap or something like that. And it has a focus on historical accuracy and pretty kind of fast-paced, deadly gameplay.
And what would you say sets it apart from other World War II games, other mods? What is so special in this one?
Compared to most mainstream World War II mods, it's very authentic. And by that I mean that all the weapons that you can use are, of course, World War II weapons, but it also depends on what time the map plays, as in what year, sometimes what month. It depends on what unit you are playing as, and that kind of decides which guns you can use. And this is something that is kind of missing, especially like modern World War II games have this weird tendency of watching a few videos of, forgotten weapons and then putting all kinds of weird prototype stuff in, and we generally don't do that. It's mostly standard equipment, but a lot of it. And we also go into, let's say, more forgotten fronts of World War II. Like the latest update, 2.6, adds the French, which you don't usually see in World War II games, and all their weapons, of course, as well. But we also have stuff like the Finns or the Italians, New Zealand, all these fairly obscure nations, in addition to, of course, the standard stuff, Germany, Russia, US Army, Britain, and so on.
I guess this accurate representation of World War II was basically also the inspiration for the project.
Correct. I mean, that was before my time. As I said, I wasn't involved in the development of Forgotten Hope 1 at all. I just bought it on a weird compilation. But basically, when Battlefield 1942 came out, it was pretty inaccurate in terms of history and also didn't have that much content. For example, the Japanese that you can play on Wake Island, I'm pretty sure in the very first, like in the release version of Battlefield 1942, they just ran around with German weapons. I think they even drove around like in Tiger tanks. They added some more stuff later, but that's how it started out. And the dream of Forgotten Hope 1, so to speak, was to add more variety here. And the secondary thing was actually, as you can kind of hear from the name, this depressing name, Forgotten Hope, like the idea was to portray the early war when Germany and the Axis powers were winning, so before 1942. And in fact, some of the first content that was made for it and shown on the news updates, if you go on our website, if you go like right to the start, was actually some French 1940 content. Ironically, what ended up happening is that most of the content made for FH1 was 1943 to 1945 stuff, so it didn't actually pan out that way. And it's the same with Forgotten Hope 2, of course. Most of our stuff is later. Although that's changing right now with a new patch, of course.
Since the first part of Forgotten Hope started in Battlefield 1942, was it a fluent transition to Battlefield 2? Did the whole team basically say, hey, there is a new engine, we use it, or was there a delay?
What I do know is this. I think even before Battlefield 2 came out, they planned to port over to that, and some of the last content that they made for Forgotten Hope 0.7, that was the last official patch, was actually made already with Battlefield 2 in mind. So they were more high poly, they had normal maps, stuff like that, and were then used in Forgotten Hope 2. So it was planned, and back then I think DICE actually also planned to really lean into the whole modding thing. That's why they started out immediately with a Battlefield 2 editor already available, and they actually had like guys working on that, but that was dropped relatively quickly after a while. I think they figured that they couldn't actually make a lot of money from that, which is fair. Now, I know there were some devs that did not go over from Forgotten Hope 1. Like, for example, Armin Ace, I don't think he did much for Forgotten Hope 2, even though he was a big wig in Forgotten Hope 1. But I think many of the ones from that time actually went over. And yeah, Forgotten Hope 0.7 was the last FH1 version that was made by that team. Today it's still under development, but by a completely different team, and it's called Forgotten Hope SW. It's like a Japanese team. They add a lot of prototype stuff and so on, but we're not affiliated with them basically at all.
Are there still some developers left from the original version, or are they all gone now?
I think they are mostly gone. That said, from time to time they kind of put their head through the door and say, hey, hello, nice release, and so on. So they're still kind of around, but they don't really, I don't think anybody from that time period worked on the mod anymore. Some people like Nutty, for example, he got a job at DICE at some point. Other people like Toddle and I think Kretzer, they worked on Red Orchestra 2 or Rising Storm 2, I think. For Tripwire. So many of them actually went into the industry.
And can you maybe give me a rough number how many developers are currently working on the project?
14, I would say, are generally quite active right now.
That's a nice number.
Yeah, used to be less.
And another number, can you maybe give me roughly an estimate how big the mod is? How many maps, weapons, stuff like that?
Maps, I think we are at 55 now, I want to say, with the new patch. Yeah, I think we're at 55 maps. Weapons and tanks, I don't know, a lot.
Yeah, I guess especially since you included factions like Finland or Poland, now France.
It's also kind of hard to quantify, to be honest, because it kind of also depends on how you would count it. Do you count single grenades as weapons? Do you count the bayonet on a rifle as a separate weapon, because the game does that? So I would have to really count that by hand. You can't automate that. So yeah, I don't know, and it's not so easy to find out actually.
Especially since you have added so many smaller factions from the war. How did you decide to include even the smaller factions from World War II? In nearly all games out there from this era, we only have Germany, maybe Russia, USA, and the Japanese. That's it. But you have such a big number. How did this happen?
Well, we just wanted to. It's nice, isn't it? And as modders, we don't really have to worry about it being economical. I mean, we had stuff that nobody in their right mind would do if there was money on the line, Just as an example, for the French update, the French submachine gun, the MAS 38, was in reality really, really rare. So we also made it rare in game. So basically that means we made a complete weapon. That means 3D models, sounds, animations, coding, the whole thing, making icons for it, and maybe most players who play the game will never use it. It's just nobody in their right mind does that, but we do it because we don't care really. We just want to have the cool World War II stuff, and we want it to be authentic.
I guess that's also kind of the reason why you have hidden certain weapons and kits on the map. So it's there, but it's not the main item of the army.
Yeah, it's basically that. Well, actually, there's 3 reasons we do that. These are called internally pickup kits, and there are 3 types of pickup kits, right? One is like what you have in the spawn screen is what a normal kind of rifle platoon in that army would have at that time of the war. That's the standard stuff that you can spawn in with. And then we have pickup kits, and the first type is stuff that would be maybe at a company or battalion level, like a heavy machine gun or a mortar. That would not be like at the squad or platoon level maybe. And the second type are rare weapons that were in use, but maybe not as standard equipment. As an example, PPD submachine gun that they still had lying around maybe in 1942, but it's not the standard stuff anymore. So you can get it, but most people will run around with a normal PPSH. So that's an example. And then the third type are just really Easter eggs, like we have the famous Angry Farmer kit, which comes with a shotgun and a what's it called, that instrument that you use to pick up a pitchfork, So you have a shotgun and a pitchfork, and that is just a joke kit, or like we have a kit with a sword in it, or an Indiana Jones kit, that kind of thing. So 3 types basically.
And talking about the general equipment of the army, was this achieved by doing research, or was it just a balancing thing? How did you come up with the equipment basically?
Well, here's the thing. The general spawn menu is always or mostly the same, and the kits were decided during the really early development where I wasn't there. But what kind of weapons we put into these for each situation, yeah, that's kind of a research thing. Balancing is kind of secondary. We balance per map. So we try to have it so that each map can be won by both teams. We don't really care about like individual fairness, like, oh, the other side has better submachine guns. Yeah, we don't care. We don't care if the Germans have better tanks, maybe. If you can win the map still, then we don't give a hoot.
Yeah, I like that approach. We often have in games the problem more in the World War II era or a little bit sidestep in the sci-fi era, where you have, for example, in Star Trek, the Borg, this amazing, big, strong empire, basically, and they always get it wrong, that the units are too weak. And I like your approach that you say, well, the German tanks are better. That's basically, I say it, fact, and you have to deal with it.
Well, it depends, but yeah.
It's not a hard fact, but yeah, you know what I mean.
In some cases, yeah. We kind of, in many ways, we approach each map of ours a bit like in a strategy game, because in real-time strategy games you usually have different factions, and each of them have a different strengths and different weaknesses, but they are, at least ideally, balanced against each other, so none is more powerful. And we do the same thing. It's kind of asymmetrical balance, where they don't necessarily have the same stuff, but overall the map is hopefully balanced.
But I guess it's really hard to achieve the goal of being really accurate, especially in the sense of equipment, map design, and maybe limitation of the engine. How often get you basically into a corner where you say, we can't achieve this goal, we have to make shortcuts?
Well, I mean, that does happen. You mentioned, trouble with the engine. One thing that was possible in Battlefield 1942, and of course also Forgotten on 1 then, was having really big ships and aircraft carriers, landing and taking off planes from aircraft carriers and running around on ships. Due to the way that objects interact in the Battlefield 2 engine, that's just not possible. You would completely glitch around on a ship, and I mean, planes that they would just immediately explode. So we are, for example, quite limited there. There have been fan-made custom maps set in the Pacific that have ships, but I've never really liked how they work because they're so simplistic compared to the rest of the mod. Like how in our mod, tanks normally have different armor values depending on which plate you hit, and they have different types of ammunition. And these ships were basically just point and click, and you couldn't even run around on deck and do cool things like in Battlefield 1942. So that's, for example, one limitation that we probably won't be able to get around, and yeah, it's a bit sad.
Yeah, I love these Navy battles in the first Battlefield. It's so sad that nearly no other Battlefield has it until now.
Well, realistically, I wonder how fun these really were, and if it's not a lot of nostalgia in retrospect. I think there's a reason they kind of cut that stuff out. It was more of a novelty thing for most people, I would say. But yeah, it would be nice to at least have the option and maybe do something cool with it. But as it looks right now, if we go to the Pacific, which is quite possible, probably it will not be in the sense of having lots of big ship-to-ship battles. Probably will be more about running into trenches and tunnels and clearing jungles and stuff like that, which is also cool, but yeah.
Talking a little bit about your new maps, I saw you have a ton of information about those new maps. How much time did you guys invest into this? Alone the documents are amazing.
Yeah, that's actually new. We haven't done it like that before, this big marketing kind of push, but I don't know how much time they spent on the dev box. I made one, and that took maybe a couple of hours. It takes a lot less time than actually making the map, and yeah, but I think it shows that, especially this time, the team was really, really enthusiastic about the new front and wanted to share a lot of the research we did with the community, which we normally don't really do. Often a lot of research goes into the maps and we never actually talk about it. I think many people, even veteran players, don't know some of the meaning behind some of the decisions we made on that. So this time they can actually look it up.
It's so nice. I hope you archived this somewhere, maybe on a wiki or something. I told a friend of mine, basically my co-host of another show, that this is how a mapper should do its documentation. basically every step, every kind of research detail into it, maybe even the source in the description below. It's really nice. It's a good job done by you. Hats off.
Yeah, thanks.
I know you didn't start at the beginning of the first part, but over the many years, can you maybe tell me what were the biggest problems during the development? You mentioned Navy battles, but anything else maybe?
Okay, biggest problems. The thing is, many of the really frustrating problems didn't come from the engine or technical limitations. It's often because of the kind of unofficial nature of what we do. So obviously, very often people, drop out, which is fine, obviously. Sometimes you have better things to do. But that also means that because we don't pay anybody, sometimes you can't really get the skills you maybe need at that second. So very often we had trouble getting people in certain areas that we really would need to progress, and then development can stall for a bit. Big example, player models. For a while, we didn't have somebody who could make player models because that's a lot harder to do than buildings or tanks or hand weapons. It's its own thing, and putting them into the Battlefield 2 engine is also quite tricky and probably the most complex thing, except for mapping, but mapping is easier in other ways. But yeah, it's very complex and needs a specialist. And so for a long time, we didn't have that. Throughout the whole development of the Eastern Front, we got one set of Russian player models, and after that we had to kind of, to get winter models, we had to modify them in a rather kind of improvised manner. Now for the French release, we finally got a guy, Harmonicata, who managed to make them, even though it took a long while, but he did learn a lot of things doing it. And so now we are set in that regard. But there were other kind of bottlenecks like that. For example, for a while we didn't have anybody who could make proper animations for first-person animations, for example, which of course really limits what you can do in terms of new weapons. So that's always the biggest problem, not having the correct people. In terms of weird bugs, most of the bugs are kind of boring, but I know one that took ages to find, where if you drove a certain tank past a certain line on the map, the whole server, not even the server, like your complete computer froze, which I have never seen a bug like that, but yeah, we figured that one out after a while. But yeah, generally speaking, most of our trouble is human resources related.
This is quite nice that the engine isn't limiting your creation that much.
Well, I mean, there's lots of limits. I mean, one of the most stupid limits, although we did some experiments and we might be able to actually go around this somehow, one of the stupid limits in the Battlefield 2 engine is the server tick rate, which also means that we can't, we can only set hand weapons at certain firing rates because of that. And it's very limited. Like, we can do 450 and 600 and 900, but nothing in between, which sometimes means that we have to set the weapons to unhistorical firing rates. We think we might have found a way to maybe go around that at some point, but it will be a lot of work to do that. So yeah, there's some stuff there. But generally speaking, there's this kind of standard thing where everybody says, the Battlefield 2 engine, it's so crap and there's so many things we can do. And while that is kind of true, I also kind of think that art comes from adversity or from limitation sometimes. And I think sometimes it's a blessing in disguise that certain things aren't possible.
So I hear there are no plans to switch anytime soon to a different engine.
No, and I don't want to leak anything because I'm already too known for that. Let's just say that behind the scenes there are developments going on to fundamentally overhaul the Battlefield 2 platform, so to speak, to the point where it might as well be a new engine. There are plans here, there's some work done in that direction, and yeah, that's all I can say here.
Is this also the future of Forgotten Hope 2, or is there still enough future for the mod version, basically?
Well, I mean, it will remain this version, but we will overhaul it, I hope, if everything works out, to the point where it doesn't look like it anymore. But yeah, generally speaking, our future plans for Forgotten Hope 2 are we will release some more maps related to France 1940. and we have plans to release 2 new factions. I think we will announce maybe in a month or so what exactly these plans are. Some people maybe have already figured it out by looking at the internal changelog, which we always release as kind of like a nice Easter egg hunt for our more devoted fans. But yeah, there will be 2 new factions with new maps as well, and we hope that it will not take 2 years this time, because we did actually, while we were waiting for the French player models to be made, we did actually already prepare a lot of maps and content, and even a completely new set of player models for one of the new factions. So yeah, I hope we will be quite quick about it, but then again, I've said that before and then it didn't work out.
Another subject I want to touch about the future is how independent are you in the sense of server administration, server hosting? I know the Battlefield 2 servers are long gone, the original ones, but is there still a lot of information there that you can set up as a new player, a server and everything?
Well, okay, here's the thing, right? In the last few years, there has been a concerted effort by our dev team to basically gain control of as much of the infrastructure as possible, because this used to be scattered over various communities, some of which were kind of hard to work with. So the situation right now is we have control over the account servers. We set up our own account server after the Battlefield 2 GameSpy stuff went down. It used to be hosted on some other community. Now we have the server under our control. And we also control the Play FH2 servers that are in Europe, which is our main, those are the game servers, right? We have 2, I think at the moment 3, although I don't think we need that many. But that's our main area, because most of our players are Europeans. And then there are other servers that are run by private people in Asia, for example, China, which is behind the Great Firewall. We don't interact with them much. They do their own thing. They also mod our game quite extensively and do their own custom maps. So these are not under our control, but we don't care. But we want to control the main servers in Europe, so we can restart them when we want to. Then we can assure that our map picking scripts run on them and so on. And in terms of setting up a new server, you can do that. You will have to ask us to be displayed in the server browser. If you want to open up another server in Europe, that is just like a normal multiplayer server, we will probably just say no, because we don't want any competition here, because in the past that always led to situations where the community got split, and it isn't a good situation. We want that under control.
Yeah, I totally understand that, especially splitting the community is never a good idea.
Especially because we don't have a big community. It's fairly stable, although ever since the Ukraine crisis began, it kind of has taken a hit. But quite stable, but it's small.
But the important thing for me is that the information is basically safe. We experienced it so many times in the history of gaming that when the master servers were shut down, the community was lost basically. They couldn't recreate the master servers. It's stuck in the Stone Ages basically again. And yeah, you guys did it. You managed to secure that information, and that's quite positive, I think.
Yeah, I think it was actually originally PR, the other mod, Project Reality. I think they originally kind of reverse engineered the master server, although to be honest, it's been a while since that happened. I don't really remember it much. But yeah, we have our own basically. It was, for a while it was on PR, then it was on the World at War servers, but they quit, and now we have it.
Looking again a little bit more to the past, what would you say did you learn over those many years of development? What stuck with you basically?
Actually, I learned a lot. I mean, I learned so many technical skills, especially in the realm of image editing, stuff like that. Of course, game design, some basic coding as well. I mean, I learned a lot of English, actually. I mean, I would credit Forgotten Hope 2 with that as well to a degree. So you learn a lot.
And what would you say are you most proud of?
It's kind of hard to say. For one thing, like personally, I'm of course always the proudest of the last map I released, but generally also that we're still going.
You mentioned that you touched many parts of the game. What did you work on the most?
90% mapping. I did some vehicle textures a while back, but now we have people who are way better than me at that, so I don't do that anymore. I leave that to the pros. But yeah, 90% mapping and marketing. That's why I do interviews like this. That's why I run the YouTube channel. That's 90% to get more eyes on Forgotten Hope 2.
Yeah, I can imagine that the server costs are not that low. Are you funding everything from your pockets, or is there a crowdfunding?
No, we don't do crowdfunding or donations much, but there's this guy, his handle is Flüstertüte, also a German guy, and he owns some of our servers, namely the one that the public forum is on, for example, and he accepts donations. So if you want to help out, you can donate to him. Although we're not in that close contact with him, but he basically provides that stuff to us. Other than that, I pay for 2 servers, I think. I think our development server and the public server, I own them technically, but it's not that much money really.
Yeah, if it's on your own machine, basically, it's only a little bit of traffic, I guess. But yeah, everything nowadays is hurting your bank account, basically.
Yeah, it's inflation, isn't it?
Coming slowly to a close, what would you recommend a new player starting this game for the first time? What should be the first steps?
The very first step is go into your settings and put the sound on high, because otherwise you will get a bug which we can't really fix. Otherwise you will get a bug where everybody seems to be shouting at you because there's no 3D sound. So that should be the first step. Speaking maybe a bit more seriously, you should expect to die a lot at first because the game's pretty hard. Probably you play as infantry first, go into a squad when you join the server so you have another spawn point. And then slowly learn the maps, learn the different sounds of weapons, so you can tell apart who's the enemy and who isn't. And if you team kill somebody, which will happens, I mean, I team kill people left and right, but you should always say sorry. And that's basically a good starting point.
And I guess a new player should also know about the community Discord.
Yeah, that's basically where the main community stuff is going on right now. We also still have the forums, but they're basically dead at this point. Which I kind of prefer the forums compared to Discord, but well, you know, we have to go with the times.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And it does have advantages, I will say that.
Should anybody watching this have the idea, hey, I would like to help you guys, where can he contact you? Over the community Discord or via email?
Discord is best. We do have an email address, and every 3 months or something like that, somebody will say, wait, I should probably check that out. But yeah, generally speaking, Discord at this point.
And I guess not over mod database, like I.
Yeah, no, that's a tertiary channel for us.
Okay, I would say this is the part of the video where I open the mic to you. Is there anything you would like to add? Anything I missed, basically?
Well, you know, not really, just please try Forgotten Hope 2, it's free. Play fh2.net, you can download the standalone version, don't even need Battlefield 2 because that's not sold anymore. And you can just start. At this point, it's basically a standalone free-to-play game.
Well, then I have to say thank you for joining me. It was nice talking with you. Learned a lot about this game. I played it for over now 15 years, I would say. Not the whole time, but every 6 months I played 5 or 6 rounds and I always enjoy it. It's a nice community, I have to say, which you created there.
That's good to hear, thanks.
Okay, I would say that's it for this video. Leave us a comment, tell us what you think about the game, and of course, play the game. Until next time.
Goodbye.